Hey folks, it's Tim with another review, although not a flashlight one today. I'm going to be covering the DSTE Nikon D7100 clone grip. This is basically a clone of the Nikon's MB-D15. I ordered this off Amazon.com. Price paid was about $66.73, and I ordered it on October 7th. It arrived today, so 10 days from China. Not too shabby, although it did arrive in this flimsy packaging. Literally was just a plastic wrap with no cushioning whatsoever, so I'm actually pretty surprised that this box arrived with just minimum dings, no major damage. It's a rather nondescript box. It doesn't even have DSTE on here, so probably confirms the assumption that a lot of people make about how these are probably made by the same factory and just, you know, shelled out to a few other different companies. So anyway, put that on the side. I did opt it for the one that includes a additional battery. I believe if it's just the grip itself, I think it runs in the 40s. So again, this came with one additional EN-EL15 clone. So I'll get to that in a second. And of course, it does arrive with this pretty thorough instructions, actually. I was very surprised by this. And then again, looking at it and how perfect the English is, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if this was literally just taken straight from Nikon's original MB-D15 grip. So I'll get to that in a bit as well. Now the grip does also come with the optional adapter for the 6AA cells. So this one is for the EN-EL15, and the one that came installed was for the 6AAs. Comes with a gel pack, and this is for the 6AAs. Now, first thing I want to cover is obviously the concerns about, okay, the main reason why anyone would buy a aftermarket grip versus the original is of course the price. But with the price comes the natural question, hey, I'm paying a cheaper price, but is it worthwhile? How's the quality? So overall, I mean, if you really look into the details of this, right? So getting into a close-up shot here, you may notice, like, say, around these edges here, there's some very, very minor glue overrun. I mean, it does feel very, very nice and solid. The overall texture of the rubber, or if it's full rubber, as well as the texturing here, does match the original Nikon D7100 almost perfectly. Like, pretty much, if once with this installed, I wouldn't even be able to tell that, you know, if this was a aftermarket grip or if this was the original Nikon one. But of course, I don't have the original Nikon one for comparison. I'm just going basically solely on my D71's finish and texture here. So overall, it does match very, very nicely. Overall button feel, I would say the joystick is pretty good, very solid, nice tactile feedback. This auto exposure lock button does feel very mushy though. It doesn't quite have the same nice feedback that I have on my D7100, so that's a minus there. And as for these scroll buttons here, you can literally tell that this is plastic, pure plastic. It really feels more like a Panasonic DMC G5, and there's very little texturing on here. So even though there are those grooves here, it's quite slippery. Doesn't offer the best texture, and that sound is much louder than, say, on the D7100s. Doesn't quite have the same quality feeling, but hopefully it should be good enough. And likewise for the same on the front scroll button. Again, this is just pure plastic, very slippery, and it just sounds like it's just hitting up some micro switches, a micro switch under there. Now as for the on-off switch here, this definitely does not have the same feel as the D7100. It just feels purely plasticky and semi-loose, definitely not as precise, although the shutter button does feel good enough. The half pressed is a very distinct stop, and then full press, it does provide decent tactile feedback, so at least that part isn't bad. Now the main concern would be around how sturdy this thing is, right? So there was, I got a lot of good tips by reading other people's reviews about certain aftermarket grips. Now, one main concern that people always point out is whether or not there's a full metal bar running underneath here for the tripod support. So here's a magnet, and it does show that that does run fully from the bottom left. or I should say right, to the bottom left. Okay, and then in terms of, like, say, the battery arrangement here, this clip here is actually metal. So that metal matches up with this metal slot here for better, I guess, more robustness. So at least it's not plastic. It's not something I feel would break off. Like, say, if you dropped your camera and you impact it on this corner, I feel that it should survive a stand. It should survive a drop. Now, actually, in looking at this, I just noticed this. So this is one area where the plastic rubber, as you can see, this arrived just the way it is. It was probably missing some glue there. Oh no, actually it was meant to be that way. I got fooled because I see this over here that looks like glue, so, but it's actually not. I guess this is meant to route a adapter wire or something like that. And I guess that makes sense because this is for the EN-EL15. So this rubber cover was meant to be removed. I guess let me just try to slot it back in. Okay. Now I do notice that, though, the difference between the EN-EL15 and the AA is that the AA, the logo here is white versus it being green here. I don't know what the distinction is, but at least if that was, say you have both of them in your bag and you want to tell which one was which, that's one easy way to know. Green for lithium ion and white for your AA's. Now, since I literally just got the grip in, I didn't even bother to look inside of here, but you could easily see that that metal bar is in there and it does run through. So, haha, didn't even need that magnet test, but whatever. At least it did prove a point. Now, one thing I did read about was one particular farm member on DP Review. He mentioned that one day, all of a sudden, he was not able to release his grip. Like, literally, this button just kept scrolling and scrolling. Not button, I guess this jog wheel just kept scrolling and scrolling, but it would not turn the tripod mount. Now what happens here is that there's a series of gears within here. So when you twist here, they are all connected. So that turns in synchronization with that plus the tripod mount. I'm going to get this popped open later to see, you know, if the gears are plastic, metal. I believe his was brass if I'm not mistaken, but still, I guess there was a slip and one of those gears fell out, and because of that, no matter how much he turned this, it didn't turn that. He ended up having to pry the whole thing apart and wasting his grip, but hopefully it won't be the same case with this one. The reason why I selected this one was obviously the price, number one, but number two, I heard some pretty good feedback on it, and a couple of members on DP Review recommending it. So again, just getting back to the overall fit and finish, I don't see any glue overrun here whatsoever. These are close-ups, so you could get a very good idea of the texturing, and as mentioned, literally, you know, I haven't seen the original MB-D15, so I don't know, but I would be hard-pressed to tell that this was a clone. So short of that minor, very minor glue overrun there in this corner here, and perhaps very minor protrusion over there, overall the fit and finish is pretty good, but who knows how long this thing will last. So I'll report back in the coming weeks or months, you know, depending on how it holds up, and add comments to this video to see, you know, how well it is holding up. Now here's the clone EN-EL15 battery that it came with. Again, overall, seems like quality is okay, but again, who knows how it will be in the long run. Doesn't matter how the plastic is, although it looks pretty much for all intents and purposes identical to the original EL15. But I'm just going to go ahead and get this mounted here. Okay, so that's how it works. You push this down, put the battery in, slide it forward, let that loose so that it locks in place. Then you take the whole thing, slide it in here. So take off this plastic. And go ahead and get this mounted on. So now this wheel rotates in I guess, direct conjunction with the front wheel, so you could pretty much use, as you're rotating this with your thumb, you could use your other finger to rotate. So this one goes up, that one goes down, so it rotates in synchronization. I'm actually not going to go do this too tight just in case that gear breaks or whatnot, and then I can't get this off, but it is reasonably snug right now, and overall, I guess there is a very slight little play there, but of course, I'm not mounting it like super tight right now, so for fear of like I said, just getting it jammed, but what the heck, let me just go ahead and do it. So what I'm doing is I'm actually pushing down on the base and then rotating that gear into place. So okay, now that I've got that fully mounted, feels very rock solid. There's very minor, observe here carefully, flex. And I don't know if the MB-D15 suffers from the same fate, but you figure if the center point of mounting is solely by that one screw dead center here, and then at the very extremes here, if there's some minor flex, I would say that's pretty good overall. That's not too bad. Although, of course, for OCD types, you'll probably go crazy about that, but I don't know. I mean, this is my first experience with one of these aftermarket grips, or a grip, period. So I don't really know, I don't have anything to reference it against. So again, as you can see here, the finish matches pretty well with the standard Nikon D7100's finish. And overall, looks-wise, like I said, it just looks like it's the original MB-D15 grip. But of course, caveat that I don't have the original one to compare to. Okay, so now it's time to test the functionality of the grip. So first thing you'll notice is that there's that BP icon right next to the battery, and that indicates that it detects a second battery installed. So first things first, this grip does come with a lockout switch, right? So pretty much if this switch is in this position, do not mistake this for being a on-off switch. It is not. That's not its purpose. Its main intent is to lock out this entire dial as well as all the functionality, so you don't accidentally activate the camera if that is in lock mode. So case in point, I'm going to shoot this into live view. I'm going to attempt to focus with the grip, and as you can see, it's not focusing, but I'm going to go ahead and focus with camera shutter, and as you can see, it is focused. Now, of course, given I do review a lot of flashlights, the particular subject for my focus point is a Spotlight Shifter 1.0. This is a single cell AAA size light that they sent for review, so I'm going to get to that in the future. But for now, back to the main star of the show. I'm going to go ahead and flick this into on mode. First things first, test out the shutter. As you can see, that does focus and then take the picture. All right, now I do have the Sigma 1770C lens installed right now, and many people have asked, what is this scrolling problem that I keep hearing about, as well as the preview problem? So the preview problem is that I do have my camera set to review only 4 seconds, right, after I take a picture. Now, as you can see, this is definitely way past 4 seconds now, and the preview has not shut off. So in case you have this tripod mounted and or whatever, you took a picture, you're in preview mode, totally forgot, just left your camera, it's going to contain to drain your battery. Of course, the likely scenario for that is maybe like a studio shot, or again, like as I mentioned, tripod mounted, where you preview a picture and you get distracted, and this will just continue to happily drain away your batteries. I don't know if the power savings override will override this. I'll get to that in the future, but for now, the second issue is the scrolling problem. Now, this scrolling problem only appears in non-live view mode. So in live view mode, this is a good chance to test this multifunction scrolling. So as you can see, I am able to scroll fine. However, though, if like say I was out of live view mode and I took a picture and it comes into preview and I zoom in and then attempt to scroll, of course it would scroll now. Wow, this is very, very interesting. So turns out that this phenomena only affects this controller on the Nikon D7100 itself. Case in point, I'm going to use the grips scrolling button. Oops, sorry, let me just zoom in again. And as you can see, it continues to scroll with no problems. But if I attempt to use the D7100 scroll button, you see that? Press it down, it'll scroll for a little bit, and then it'll get stuck. And it will no longer scroll. So anyways, not to go too much of a segue here, but that is the common problem with this Sigma lens, at least specific to the 17C that 17-70C that I'm aware of. And I just report this to Sigma. Their response was pretty much, hey, tough, you don't like it, return it. Well, that was, you know, when I had it within the return period. Love the lens, but sorry, you know, Sigma, you get a thumbs down for your customer service response. Anyways, back to the grip itself. So the re-engage live view mode. So let's go ahead. I have this currently in aperture priority. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll through the aperture using the sub-dial here in the front. So as you can see, very nice and loud declicks, detents, although I'm sure the noise may not be appreciated by some, but it is accurate. It's not like, say, jumping a few versus what I am, you know, rotating the wheel at. So if I rotate 2 clicks, it's exactly 2 stops, right, of the aperture. Okay, let me go ahead and rotate this into manual mode. As for the shutter, likewise, for the main command dial here, fairly accurate and responsive. So overall, again, no issues, just other than, like I said, this is a purely very plasticky, and I just, not too much grip here. Okay, so next we're going to test the auto exposure lock button. I'm going to go ahead and get a reading here. It's 1/25th of a second. Lock that. And I'm going to go ahead and cover up the lens. So as you can see, it's locked. I'm going to go ahead and now let go. So as you can see, it does hold. So no problems here so far with any of the controls. And again, it's just like, you know, overall feeling, you know, this is not too bad. You know, nice detents and whatnot. Let's actually test the menu function. Oops. So it doesn't have the most play. It just kind of feels like I could accidentally push down versus scrolling left or right or up or down. So it's not the most accurate, but here I'm actually getting the battery readout of the new battery, and it actually does recognize it. I don't know if there's actually any circuitry in here that would prevent it from showing clones, but anyway, it does show MB-D15 and the new battery at 98%. So again, the controller works fine, although again, probably not the most precise. As mentioned, I do feel sometimes as I'm scrolling, I'm almost pushing down on it, but overall, it's okay. Now tomorrow at my church's dedication, where actually I should get an opportunity. The main reason I purchased this grip was to just have that backup battery when I use this for videography. So, and I will have a 70-30 mounted on a tripod, so that would be a good opportunity to test the overall flex of this grip. But even here, as you can see, as I grab the body or the lens, there is just some very minor flexing there. I don't know how that compares to the actual MB-D15, but overall it's not too bad. And considering for the price I paid versus, you know, Nikon's original equipment, I really can't complain. Next up, I'm going to test the 6AA battery holder just to see how that works out. So as you can see, with the battery plate installed, it does fit flush, perhaps maybe just sticking out a very light smidgen, but overall not too bad. I'm going to go ahead and power this up. And again, it does recognize that there are batteries there. And coming into the information. Now in this case, there's no percentage readout since it's just simple nickel metal hydride batteries. There's no smart circuitry for the lithium ion, but overall reads that it is full because these were recently charged. And again, I don't know how well these will function, but as you can see, it does recognize it. So in terms of removal, I would probably just apply very light pressure or some pressure here so that, you know, it won't strain the dial, these dials when I twist it, but immediately let go once it's coming up, because otherwise you're applying pressure that is not required on the gears as it's trying to come back out. So I suppose what may have happened with the fellow forum member on DP Review with his unit is that I don't necessarily know if it's over tightened or not, but there is, I suppose, upward pull, upward pressure applied here on this, and it may have lifted it just enough for a gear to have popped out so as to render these dials useless. So again, I'm going to go ahead and get this popped open just to see what makes it tick inside. Okay, so I've actually got a PH0 head mounted on this, and I'm going to go to town on the screws. Alright, ladies and gents, here's the moment of truth. I've got the screws removed off, so let's see what makes this baby tick. Alright, so first thing you'll notice is this massive little metal plate here. Haha, oxymoron there, massive little. This massive metal plate here that holds that entire gear assembly in place. Now, obviously, when you have this mounted towards the base of the D7100, all the stress will be placed on here. So you'd imagine there's a lot of pressure upwards pressure being applied. Now here's a close-up of that plate that's, as you can see, is being held together by actual screws. Although they are fairly tiny, but figured, I don't know, maybe hopefully there's some mechanical engineers out there that could help us out to see whether or not this is sufficient for the force that can potentially be generated. But so far it seems like it should be sufficient, because it's not merely these screws, it's also the fact of that top plate when it's mounted, those additional screws added on hopefully applies additional pressure here. The incident that I read about was actually posted by a forum member named J.I. Moyer. It was posted about a week ago on the DX forum on DP Review, and he mentioned that he had a grip and it failed nearly catastrophically. He had to basically tear it apart, and upon taking the top plate off, what he noticed was that this plate was actually held into place by melted plastic. So at least I'm really glad to see that that's not the case with this DTSE grip. This is actually actual screws, and as you can see, just kind of a little attention to details. You know, the fact that this wire is not just dangling loose, it's held down by tape here. Overall, the electronics seem, I mean, again, I don't know, I'm not a good judge of that. Maybe you double E's out there can pipe in here, but so far it seems like everything's soldered on pretty well, except for perhaps that wire. It's a little bit off. Sorry for the banding. It's on, it's a high contrast scene being filmed under fluorescent lighting on the RX100, but again, overall, everything just seems pretty reasonably put together. Now, one additional thing I missed earlier was the fact that there is a rubber grommet here around this base. So when you attach this to the base of your D7100, I guess that contributes to the waterproofing. Now within here, the AE auto exposure lock button, you can see it's just simply that little rubber button, and there just isn't a lot of I guess they could have made that a little bit stiffer, so that way this button wouldn't feel as mushy. But again, hey, bottom line is that it does work even if the feeling is a little bit off. Now, one thing I did notice was a slight glue overrun here, just some very slight messiness over here around the edges. So you could kind of tell it's not perfect, but again, for the price that I paid, I just really can't complain about this. It does feel very solid at initial glance, but again, we'll see how it holds up in the long run. Now, if there was one potential flaw and I suppose weakness of this grip so far in examining the circuitry, is that the soldering that was done here, I guess perhaps there was a little either accident or mishap here, that as you can see that plastic slightly burned there, so potentially compromising this whole assembly. Now what this assembly does is it's a master on-off switch, so that when you flip this switch here, did you see that? There was almost like a leaf spring that makes contact. So that's what closes the circuit on and off. So overall, I'm just a little concerned because, you know, overall this piece here just feels, you know, slightly flimsy. I mean, of course, it's very delicate here, so that's why I'm a little concerned about that part being burned there. But again, I'll report back in the long run to see how this holds up. And as for this paper template, it's just something I got into a habit of doing, which is pretty much diagramming before I take anything apart to ensure which screw goes back where, because sometimes certain screws are longer than the others, even though at first glance they look all the same length. So plus, not to mention, I figured if one was cross-threaded or somehow there's just some manufacturing defect, I prefer that screw to go back into the same hole that it came out of. So. And additionally, press fitting it in, provided that you elevate the paper a little bit on a box or something, it helps keep the screws in place as well, so you don't lose track of anything, and ensures that you have the same amount of screws that you started off with. So in closing, here are my initial thoughts of this DTSE grip. So for the amount of money that I paid, I really feel that it's a really solid investment. I would probably give it 4 out of 5 stars using Amazon's rating system. And the reason why it doesn't get 5 stars is just the fact that, again, I'm just, of course, being very nitpicky here. There are some slight glue overrun. There was the fact of that, electrical part, the soldering job in there that was just slightly off. And overall, it does seem solid enough, but who knows how long this will hold up. Plus, not to mention the company, this came from China, so who knows how support is as well. So in the long run, it still remains to be seen how it holds up. But so far, initially, I'm pretty impressed. The main reason I got this was, again, for videography. I wanted the additional battery capability, but in terms of holding it for portraits, because I do prefer a strap rather than a neck strap, a wrist strap, does kind of get in the way, especially if you use live view or whatnot. But overall, it does feel comfortable enough. This is the first time I've ever had a grip on any DSLR, and it does take a little getting used to of kind of having your grip here, but yet your eyes are all the way on the bottom left corner now, versus being over here right next to it. Not a big deal, but just I've never used one before, so it took a little getting used to. But again, of course, if this wrist strap in the way, it does make it a little awkward though. But overall, the grip, it feels reasonably very solid. There is sufficient room here. I've always felt that the D7100's grip, even though I don't have fairly large hands, I just have medium-sized hands, just didn't seem long enough here. Just always felt like my middle finger was catching on here and scratching up the innards here when holding onto the camera. So this actually provides a slightly deeper grip, and the rubber is tacky enough that it provides a very nice good feeling, and this raised ledge here for your thumb does add additional leverage as you're holding it. Now, one thing I wish though is that even though this part was raised out, I wish it had came out perhaps just a little further. The main reason why is like when I set the camera down, now this is with the 6 AA, so it does add a significant amount of heft, but even with a small lens like a Sigma 1770, it still topples forward. The center of balance is just not quite right. So I wish I had been flared up perhaps just a little bit more. Again, I don't know how the original Nikon version is, but at least for this particular one, that's just something I wish they would improve upon. Not to mention also at the base here, as you can see, it doesn't really sit flush with the back of the camera. Had they made the mold here surround the base of the camera completely, so it kind of cups it instead of just sitting here, I feel that may have added additional support so that it would have potentially reduced the flex here. Not that the flex is significant, because again, like I said, it's actually fairly decent. There's only a minor amount of flex that you can see visible there right now. And again, I'll get to test this out tomorrow night at my church. I'm going to attach a 70-300, which is pretty hefty, just to see how well it holds up. Just to recap, the battery that came with it does seem to be pretty good quality. Again, of course, I don't know what kind of cells are in use here, but it did charge up in the D7100's charger perfectly. There were no issues with that. Of course, anytime that you use an aftermarket battery, you are taking a risk, because who knows what kind of cells and whether they've implemented protection circuitry. But based upon what I've seen in there so far, this does seem to be of reasonable quality, but of course, buyer beware, use your own discretion. For me, I'm obviously going to give it a try and just see how it works out. Bottom line, I'm fairly impressed with this grip, and I look forward to using it and reporting back in the coming months to see, again, how well this thing holds up. I would rate this as a buy, and as part of FTC disclosures, I have no affiliation with this company. It was something I simply wanted for personal use. I purchased this off of Amazon.com. No products used in this review were sponsored, with the exception of the Spotlight flashlight, which I'll get to in a future review. Thanks again for watching.